Hello, and welcome to Feelings Matter, brought to you by Mindful Appy. I'm Michelle Stinson-Ross.
And I'm Tina Schweiger.
He's my co-host. And guess what? We have a special guest, Mr. Sam Fiorella. And just to kind of give you a little bit of a clue before Sam jumps in and explains a little more, Sam is an entrepreneur. He is a philanthropist. And he is doing a whole lot of really good things in the mental health space, particularly for students and young adults, as well as some things for parents. Sam, take it away and fill everyone in on exactly what it is you're up to.
Well, in the area of mental health, which has been a focus of mine, it isn't what I do for a living, but it is what I do as a passion, as an obligation, and as self-therapy. I co-founded and run the Lucas Fiorella Friendship Bench, and the yellow is for Hello Mental Health campaign, which is a initiative in secondary and post-secondary schools that encourages peer-to-peer conversations about mental health. And one of my more recent projects is 100 Misfits, which is the retelling of 100 mental health stories or journeys of that I encountered in my travels over the last 6 years with the Friendship Bench, lecturing parents and students on mental health. So while I do run the business, I have, as you said, I'm an entrepreneur. I run a marketing agency and a software company that helps pay the bills. But every waking free moment I have, I try and work on those mental health awareness projects.
And that is very personal to you. Do you want to share a little bit of the story about how all this came about?
Yes. I think it's hilarious that I am focused on this. And I mean, as Michelle, as you know, we've known each other for a lot of years. We met on a stage at a conference. I spent like 12 years traveling the world on stages talking about marketing and sales, and then the book that I wrote at the time and all the other self-promotion that I did in the marketing world. And then that all stopped when I lost my son just over 6 years ago to suicide. And I learned of his secret suffering with depression only after we lost him. Lucas is one of those stories that we hear so often that, somebody, the happiest person, you think of celebrities like a Robin Williams, who outwardly is like the happiest person imaginable, everything going for them, they're doing well in life. And then out of the blue, something like this happens. And that's when you discover what was really going on. And my son was one of those cases. We lost him at 19 years old. And that learning about his secret suffering and realizing that I knew nothing about mental health or suicide prevention, like nothing. I was not aware. He didn't show any signs, but even if he did, quite frankly, I realized in that moment that I wouldn't have seen it. I wouldn't have known, even if he did display some signs, because I was completely ignorant of this. No one had ever taught me about it. No one ever spoke about it in my family, even though there were, I discovered after the fact, cases of suicide and mental health issues, but nobody ever talked about it because it was taboo. And so I dropped what I was doing. I obviously had to maintain running my business, but I stopped all my public speaking and I took that talent and that skill and I moved it to mental health awareness. I started with focusing on students, talking to students, trying to understand why was it that my son couldn't say anything, didn't say anything, even though he was really suffering for 6 years, 7 years before he finally succumbed to the disease. And how is it that I didn't know? So then I started talking to parents, and then that led me to get into schools. And then I just, I got on this circuit, and that's kind of what I've been doing in my evenings and weekends for the last 6.5 years.
Sam, I thank you for sharing. For all parents out there, including Michelle and myself, it's just, as we've mentioned, my heart goes out to you. I don't even know how how you do it. And the fact that you've been able to take that incredibly painful life event and turn it around into something to help others is truly admirable. Thank you.
Thanks. I have a hard time those compliments because it's really, I don't know that I'm particularly a strong person or a brave person or all of the words that people have used. I did this. I started this because I needed answers. This was therapy for me. It was a way for me to rationalize something that could not be rationalized, which is the loss of a son at 19 years old who was in university, was getting good grades, had working, didn't have student debt, had a girlfriend, had friends. I mean, he was in a very difficult program to get into. So he was studying robotics with a focus on aerospace because he was working on as a volunteer on the next Canada Arm for NASA. I mean, like he had everything going for him, and so the shock of not just of losing a child, but of losing a child to suicide, which is, I mean, we can have a whole hour conversation just on that. That is a completely different grief because it comes with guilt. It comes with the trauma and there's never a sense of resolution when you lose a child to suicide, because as a parent, you're always like, what could I have done? I should have known. There's a guilt that just never goes away. And even though the therapists, tell us, there's nothing you could have done, even parents who know their kids are suffering sometimes lose their child. It doesn't take, you can never take that guilt away. And so that adds a level of trauma that you just can't. And to this day, I suffer with PTSD. I'm medicated every day. I still see a therapist all later. So I did it for that reason. I did it because I needed answers. And then I got angry.
Have you gotten any that have helped?
I want to say yes, but the answer is no. I mean, from a PTSD perspective and a depression perspective, I'm no longer as bad as I used to be. I found, Lucas's mom and I found a great self-help group. We went to this peer-to-peer support group focused specifically with people who have lost a loved one to suicide. That saved my life, I think, because I was spiraling pretty bad. So that helped me get to where I needed to be level. So between the medication, the therapy, and just actively trying to do something positive and honoring my son's legacy, which is what Friendship Bench, the whole Friendship Bench started initially because of answers, but in the questions that I asked, I learned things about my son and how he saved people's lives, prevented people from taking their life by recognizing their struggles. I needed to live his legacy and continue his legacy and honor him. And so just staying focused on that and not on the loss, and focused on what he did and that positivity, that I think keeps me going. But the pain, it keeps the pain at bay is, I think, the best way to put it.
So I want to ask you more about the Friendship Bench, but before I do, I see we've got some people tuned in live and watching along. If you guys have questions for Sam, if you have comments, if you want to share a little bit of your personal story, whatever you want, you are more than welcome to use the live chat to engage. If you have questions, I will do my best to put them on the screen and we can address them live. I just want to make sure that you guys knew that that was an option. And like I said, I want to go a little bit more into the Friendship Bench, the Yellow is for Hello campaign, and how is that Lucas's legacy?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, in my desperation to understand what happened and why we lost him, I found out through his friends that he was actually active for years before that, literally saving people's lives, stopping people from who were about to take their life, on the day that they were planning on doing it, or stopping some kids from dropping out of school, or leaving the dorms and going back home because they couldn't adjust because of mental health issues. And every one of these stories from different people, different parts of the country that didn't know each other, all of their stories started exactly the same way. And so these stories were coming to, his mom and I, and they all started with, Lucas just came up and said hello out of the blue. And so some friends of mine, Danny Brown and Robert Clark, we were sitting down having a beer. They were trying to console me, and I was telling this story. And they said that we should do something. Like, it's too bad he's not here to keep saying hello. And then I said, okay, how do we do that? And so we we all came out of the digital marketing, social media space and said, okay, how do we create a movement? And so we came up with the program, Yellow is for Hello, which is centered around a yellow big that we donate to secondary and post-secondary schools as part of the campaign. The entire campaign is based around encouraging students to have open and frank conversations about mental health, about not being afraid to say hello and to accept a hello. And so that's basically what it is. Not just the bench. The bench is, everybody knows us for the bench. The actual campaign is Yellow is for Hello, and schools are using the bench as a centerpiece for media walls, for their own social media posts, for their own internal campaigns, all using this color yellow, which the psychology of yellow, we found out, means hello, means a greeting. And obviously it's happy with the sun and all that kind of stuff. So we thought, what a perfect color. And so they're using that now to inspire conversations. And there's just too much to get into in the detail. If you visit yellowisforhello.org or thefriendshipbench.org, you can learn more information about the details. But we're in about 70 schools across the country right now here in Canada, which is where we're focused currently. And we've seen an increase of about 18 to 20% in the number of kids asking for help after we've gone in. So our main goal is not to be a therapists. We are not counselors. We're not trained to be that. Our main goal is to ensure that kids stop suffering in silence. Because suicide is 100% preventable. If you can get the help that is available in many schools and in many communities, it can be prevented. But 50% of people who suffer with depression or anxiety or any form of mental illness, don't even realize that that's a mental illness. And B, for even those that do, won't talk about it. 50% never talk about their feelings of anxiety. Yet most students surveyed today report feeling so irritated at some point that they can't move, that they can't get up out of bed, that they can't go to that exam. And it's affecting their lives dramatically. And so that is mainly our goal, is to have this, make it okay. If students like my son make it okay for another person to feel okay about talking about their feelings and not be judged and not be called weird or crazy, they're more likely to go and get the help that they need. And that's obviously applicable even in the workplace as adults, but students don't have the wisdom of years of experience. They don't have that perspective. A problem for them is the end of the world. So that's why we're focused on high school and post-secondary education.
Sam, I have to call out, you're starting to get parents' attention. This is from Allison Jones. She says, my child is struggling with suicidal ideation. I don't know how to help her. Like you said, you're not a therapist. This is not going to be professional, but parent to parent. Do you want to share a little bit?
Yes, and I need to reiterate the fact that I am not a counselor, but I have lived experience and just dedicating so much of my life. All I can, and I get this every day, unfortunately, just because I've put myself out there advocating for steps to prevent mental illness. I'm always getting advice from me personally, and that's always very difficult for me to give. What I've learned, what I can say is what I wish I would have done differently. What I wish I would have done differently before I lost my son is when he was away in university, he was 19 years old. I wish that I, would not have sent him as far as I did. But knowing that I did, allowing him to go to his preferred school, that I would have video chatted with him on a more regular basis to look him in the eye and not rely on text messaging. I might have seen something. I would have not judged his decisions as harshly as I did. I would have taught him how to fail more, as opposed to just pushing him for excellence all the time. There's like little things, but these are things that you got to start early. If you've got a child that's already suffering today, the best advice that I can give from what I've heard others, professionals say, is don't try and fix the problem, which is the hardest thing for a parent to do, because we can't. They need professional help. What we can do is listen, provide a shoulder, and be willing to accept whatever they're saying and whatever they're feeling, a valid emotion. I remember when my son, I didn't know that it was mental illness at the time, but we couldn't get out of bed. And I kept telling him, when I was your age, I used to be up at 6 o'clock. I would have a job before I went to school. I would have to take 3 buses and walk 20 minutes. And I kept comparing him to me, even when he was in the middle of this, which, and at the time, I didn't know that he was suffering that way, because I didn't recognize that as a sign of potentially a mental illness. So what I would say is the best advice I can give anybody, parent or otherwise, is to not judge, is to not try and correct the situation. What these people are looking for is some validation that what they're feeling is actually real, because they think they're the only one, which is why I started the Misfits project. They think they're the only one suffering this way, and that they're afraid to talk about it. So I would encourage, and when they're 18 and 19, it's next to impossible, because we can't do anything. We can't force them to go to the doctor. With my son, one of his teachers actually told me, we recognized that there was something wrong in the last week, but we couldn't call you because it's against our privacy policies, because he's an adult, at 9 years of age. So what I would say is, be as understanding and accepting and non-judgmental as possible, but at the same time, look for friends, colleagues if he's working or in school, that will make different types of support groups available. Support groups of peers. If he's not comfortable talking to a doctor or a psychologist, there are lots of peer groups, like students, walk-in centers at universities and colleges have them, communities have them. Try and find a way to get him to talk to somebody that is right. If the one doesn't work, try another, right? If it's not one professional, it's another professional. If it's professional at all, try a student group. I find parents that have spoken to me that those 2 tips seem to drive the best results. But
so to recap,
one thing to say, get help yourself. You can't do it on your own, and certainly Listen to Me is not going to do it. There are counselors available for parents who are struggling with kids with this issue. We need to be better educated, because we are not trained counselors. So actually, probably the most important advice, I should have said that right off the bat. If you have a child suffering with any kind of a depression, anxiety, or any form of mental illness, get trained, get educated yourself with a professional, and also see somebody for your own mental health, because it drags you down. And if you're not healthy and strong enough, you're never going to be good enough.
Tina, you were about to say something?
Oh, thank you, Allison, for posting that question. And just a quick recap, what this is all about, why we're here, is because we believe that feelings, they matter in all forms, good forms, bad forms, loud forms, quiet forms, painful forms, easy forms, fun forms, angry forms. They're all valid. And that's just our call to action, which is to validate and honor all the feelings within everyone. And I hear you, as one of your biggest pieces of advice is to accept, to be non-judgmental, and to get that conversation going about the feelings and have it not be pushed down and not be suppressed. And then to get help yourself so that you can learn and know about what therapies are available, what treatments are available, how you can train yourself and become more educated and become stronger. And self-care, I can only imagine self-care would come into that as well. Self-compassion. If you can find compassion for yourself, you can find compassion for others.
And you lose that when you're hold on to that as long as you can. I know that for myself personally, I can only speak from my own experience. When I lost my son, I lost all compassion and empathy for anybody and everything. I mean, we lost family members through, old age or disease or other things. And I was at the funerals and it was like, whatever. I mean, like I just didn't care that we were losing other people. I had no capacity or empathy in me left. And it's taken me years, and I'm only just now starting to get a little bit of that back. But the one thing that I learned in our support group is that you have to be good to yourself. You have to be kind to yourself first. You have to recognize your own feelings, validate them, because you're never going to be good for anybody else unless you yourself are strong enough. And it comes down to that point. It's not so much feelings matter, which they most definitely do. It's the importance of validating them. Something you said I think is very important. People need to understand that whatever they're feeling is valid. And at that moment, I always say, well, people say, how are you doing? Well, so many people are worse off than I am, so I'm not going to complain. But then I stop myself to say, well, hold on. Yeah, maybe people are worse off, but what I'm feeling right now is horrible and is about as worse as it's going to get for me. And so that is real right now, and it is affecting my life right now. And I have to accept that is, and I have to deal with that. I can't push that down because I think somebody else is worse or has a worse day than I'm having. And as a result, I don't take care of myself. So yes, all feelings matter and they have to be validated, and you need to deal with them.
I hear you talking about comparisons. You were talking about comparing your own feelings to others, or comparing your childhood to Lucas when he was a kid. And that seems a bit of a slippery slope.
Oh, yeah. And it was. And I mean, I feel that I was as honest with him as I could be about my experience, but then I realized that I am just a completely different person than he is. I'm trying to correct that with my daughter now, who's 7 years younger than him, and now going to be going into the second year of university, the year that we lost my son. So you can imagine the PTSD. But what I'm trying to do with her differently is say, okay, well, what do you want to do out of your life? Support her. If she takes 10 years to graduate, fine. Fail a bunch of times, keep going, whatever you want. You want to be a janitor, you want to be a hairdresser, do you want to be a scientist? I don't care. What makes you happy? I'm not trying to tell her to live her life the way that I lived my life and what I found successful, what made me successful. They've got to find their own journey, and they need to know that there's a safety net below them, that we're going to catch them. We're not going to protect them all the time because they need to fail. They need to learn those hard lessons. So I don't like helicopter parenting. So I allow her to fail when necessary, but I never did that for my son. I never allowed him to fail. But I pushed him really hard to be like me. So yes, comparisons are difficult, and it's difficult for parents to allow their kids to fail, and how do we teach our kids that we're going to love them no matter what? You know what I mean?
So that
even
radical
if they fail,
acceptance. Like a radical, right? Like it's like, I accept you when you fail. I accept you when you succeed. This is part of life. It's a part of the journey.
As parents, we know it. We're going to do it, but we don't say it. I can't tell you how many kids, with my 100misfits.com project, I've interviewed all kinds of kids, and one of the common themes, these are all different stories. They basically fall into 4 themes. One of the themes is that my parents will not love me if I don't succeed. My parents will not love me if I don't get into the university that they want me to be in, if I don't get the career that they want me to. And when I ask them, that's not true. I'm a parent. I can guarantee you that no parent would say that or would think that. And they go, well, they don't say it, but they never once have given me any indication that I'm worthy if I don't do this. All they do is talk about. I did a parent conversation on the other side of this where I spoke to parents, and afterwards, a group of women came up to me in the parking lot, and there's these two women in particular stepped up and says, listen, you're talking to our kids tomorrow at an assembly. And I said, yes. He goes, could you tell them we love them, please? And I go, well, why don't you tell them yourself? Like, why should I tell your kids that you love them? He goes, well, because that's not part of our culture. Our culture is we need to push them. It's a very disciplined, regimented upbringing that we had, and that's how we do it for our kids. And that shocked me, just shocked me, which is why I started the 100 Misfits. I says, okay, parents need to understand what's the perspective of their kids instead of trying to force their perspective and their upbringing and what we went through, which is so radically different than what our kids have to deal with today. We need to do a lot more listening and educating of ourselves before we're going to be able to help kids.
Oh, Sam, our good friend Rick Dragon says he's very grateful for what you're sharing.
Rick, I love you, brother. I miss you.
Oh.
I want to answer a question that I saw there, Michelle, that stood from somebody who's listening. You know, should I tell I think the question was something to the effect of, should we tell our kids that we suffered from similar anxieties or depression or whatever mental health issues or what's for us? Yes, 100%. We need to talk about what we went through, but let's also be careful of the comparisons, right? It's one thing to say, I see your suffering. I recognize your suffering. I went through something too. It may not be what you've gone through, but this is what I went through. So let's just be careful not to make that comparison, because then kids today are always looking at parents. The reason that they want to talk to each other as opposed to parents is because we have a tendency to lecture. You know, one of the reasons why I'm getting into so many schools and I'm getting such a great reaction, as opposed to clinicians that actually know what they're doing, they got degrees on the wall, is because students don't want to hear from clinicians. They don't want to hear from parents because there's a distrust. We've spent so many years telling them what they need to think and what they need to do that they just instantly have walls put up. But when their peers, are say it's okay, then they're willing to talk about it. So because of my lived experience, because I'm telling my son's story and I'm telling them, I hear you, I see you. I believe that you're actually worse off than your parents are. I know that you've got more to deal with than your parents did because of social media, because of technology, because of the shrinking world, all of the craziness, the political craziness going on around us. We never had to deal with that. What our stresses were real at the time, but we had resiliency toolkits to be able to deal with that. The world and technology is moving at such a fast pace right now that our kids, we as parents don't have enough education and don't have enough tools to impart upon our kids, and they can't keep up. So they're really living in a different world. So definitely tell them what you're saying. If there's cases of mental illness in your family, talk about it openly, talk about it at the dinner table, normalize the conversation around mental illness, and make sure your kids understand that depression, anxiety, even low-level anxiety or low-grade anxiety is a form of mental illness. And that it's a pendulum, right? That you can go from just being stressed to anxious to depressed to something worse, but that you can come back. If you talk about it, if you get the help that you need, sometimes it's medication, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's your diet, sometimes it's exercise. There's all kinds of resiliency tools that you could use to get yourself back to that state of not being stressed and not being depressed. But that'll only happen if we normalize that conversation and make it okay to talk about mental illness in that way.
Mm-hmm. The mental health awareness aspect of this, just having enough mental health and wellness literacy to be able to discuss this. I know with my own kids, mine are a little bit younger than yours, or kind of in that same range that your children were. I have one that's 23 and one that's 19. And I had to learn fast, because it didn't take long to realize that as they were in middle school and high school and into their young adult years, that they were struggling with stuff that I didn't experience until I was well into adulthood. And it didn't take me long to figure out that, oh my gosh, I've got coping skills that they don't have. And I need to rethink the way we're talking about a lot of things. Um, I'm blessed that we managed to get there without um, really going off the rails, but I had to learn and learn fast.
Yeah. And this
Well,
is, too many parents don't allow themselves that opportunity. With our own stresses, mortgages and jobs and kids and issues with your spouse, we often don't allow ourselves enough breathing space to say, I need to focus on what I'm feeling. I need to focus on listening to my kids. And where there's a gap, get the education that I need. Find somebody that I can talk to that will guide me, instead of just falling into whatever our parents did and just plowing through it. So I'm glad you were to take that time and recognize it.
That's such an interesting point, Sam. Taking the space to, because if you don't stop and your intuition never has a chance to pick up on any cues or signals that may be there, that if you're just plowing forward, you may not be noticing. That's such a really good perspective.
Yeah, self-love, self-care. It is central to the message I try and impart to students, a different way to parents,
Mm-hmm.
because we just don't. We don't take the time, and eventually that blows up in our face in one way or.
Wow, you're not a therapist, Sam, but boy, you've got really poignant perspective to share that we are all learning from.
Well, thank you. It's just lived experience. I'm
Mm-hmm.
in I'm in an unenviable position, to have to learn all of this after I've lost my son. I wish that I could have learned this beforehand. It would have made a difference to my marriage. It would have made a difference to my family. Would have, I'm thinking, hopefully made a difference to my son. I don't know. But if anything that I say can hopefully help somebody else out there avoid what I've gone through, I'm here for it.
Sam, as we wrap up and close, if somebody wants to reach out to you, if they want to learn more about, um, you know, the Yellow Bench Project, 100 Misfits, any of the other things that you're doing, do you mind giving some clues as to where to go? Other than, I mean, I've been sharing a couple of links as we've been talking, but where are some good places for people to reach out?
Well, I think the easiest for people is probably to just use the contact form, on either of those projects. The friendshipbench.org, yellow is for hello.org, or 100misfits.org. They all go to the same place. They all come to me and my team. We have a group of volunteers that help me with that. So we do get those messages. Otherwise, on social media, I'm very, very simple, at Sam Fiorella on all of the applicable channels, Instagram, Facebook. I'm happy to accept a DM, but the easiest thing is always to go to the site and use the contact form.
Mm-hmm. You're a great option for action. I know Thursday is the Mental Health Action Day that we signed up to put our hat in the ring to sponsor. So encouraging people to take action on mental health, even if it's the very first action that they've ever taken. Reaching out to you or looking into your projects, hearing other stories, knowing that you're not alone. I mean, what a great first action that any student can take.
Yeah, exactly. And it can, I'd like to reiterate, I always like to end, if I can, as a final thought, with something that my son did, which is say hello. One hello can start a conversation, saves a life. It's as simple as that.
Sam Fiorella, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.